Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Eruvin. We are up to Perek Hey Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbay ben Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden. Amen. Before measuring the 2,000 amot of a city's tichum, we need to establish the city's borders. A city's borders are always drawn as a perfect square or rectangle, and if the borders do not actually have this shape, we adjust them so that they form one of these shapes. And the commentators explain that the same verse that teaches that the tichum of the city is in the shape of a rectangle or square also teaches that the borders of the city itself are adjusted so that they take this shape. This in effect extends the city's borders, as the following Mishnah will explain. Ketzad me'aberin et ha'arim. How do we extend cities beyond their actual borders? And the Rav explains the word me'aberin actually means to bulge, like a pregnant woman who is known as me'uberet. But we explain it in the Mishnah as how do we extend. The Mishnah says, Bait nichnas, bait yotzeh. If a city does not have a wall around it, but rather its wall is a row of attached houses at the edge of the city, and in one place there is a house that is recessed into the city, and in another place there is a house that juts out beyond it, pagum nichnas, pagum yotzeh. Or if the city has a wall and there is a tower that is recessed into the wall, and there is a tower that juts out beyond the rest of the wall, hayu sham gidudiyot givohot asarat tvachim. Or if just outside the city, which the Rav explains within 70 and 2/3 amot of the last house in the city, there were broken walls of a ruined home that are 10 tvachim high, which the Gemara says applies only if the ruin still has 3 walls or 2 walls and a roof. Ugsharim unfashot sheyesh ben bet dira, or bridges or tomb buildings in which there is a place for a guard to live, which Tfelt Yisrael explains the bridge was built in a way that the toll collector could dwell on it, and the tomb building contained a residence for the watchman. Motzin et amidah kenegdan. In all of these cases, we move the line from which we begin measurement of the city's tchum out to a point opposite these places, meaning we extend the city's borders to an imaginary line that runs from these places parallel to the city across that entire side of the city. And for example, if the structure that juts out on the city's eastern side is at the northeast corner, we imagine that there is another structure that juts out the same distance at the southeast corner, and we draw an imaginary line between the two structures that runs along the eastern edge of the city, and the entire eastern border of the city is extended to this imaginary line, and the tichum is measured from there, as the Rav explains. Whoever could see it in diagram A in the Art School Elucidated Notes will see how we are illustrating the Mishnah. Now this marks the new city border for purposes of measuring the tchum, and if necessary, this is done on all 4 sides of the city. And the Mishnah discusses a city that is not shaped like a square or rectangle at all. And if a city is shaped like a circle, we make it like a square tablet by drawing imaginary straight lines around it on all 4 sides, which the Gemara explains these lines are drawn so that they touch the points of the city that are due north, south, east, and west. Again, whoever can see diagram B will see how we are illustrating the Mishnah. Kedei sheyeh niskar et hazaviyot, the Mishnah says, again, ve'osin ota kimin tavla merubat, and we make it like a square tablet, kedei sheyeh niskar et hazaviyot, so that one gains the corners of the square drawn around the city, and the tichum is then measured from the edges of the square. Now the same applies to a city that is shaped like a triangle or that has many sides. We draw 4 straight lines passing through the northernmost, southernmost, easternmost, and westernmost points of the city, and we measure the tchum from that imaginary square or rectangle, as the Rambam writes in Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 28, halacha 7. And that is the end of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now continues to discuss how to determine a city's borders for purposes of measuring its tchum. Notnin karpef le'ir. We grant a karpef, meaning an open area of 70 and 2/3 amot to a city, so that the city's borders are extended to the end of that open area, and we measure the city's tchum from there. Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Now, Rabbi Meir derives this from a verse regarding the open areas around the Levite cities. In Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 35, pasuk 4, the pasuk says, "From the wall of the city and outward, 1,000 amot all around, which Rabbi Meir takes to mean that we measure the amot from some point beyond the city wall. Now, just to explain, when we explain Kalpif as an open area of 70 2/3 amot, this measurement is derived from the size of the courtyard of the tabernacle, which we spoke about earlier in chapter 2, Mishnah 5. Now, the sages disagree with Rabbi Meir as to when we add a Kalpif to a city. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say, Lo amru Kalpif ela ben shtei ayarot. The rabbis did not say to add a Kalpif to a city except to connect two cities. Im yesh lazu shivim ama v'shiraim v'lazu shivim ama v'shiraim. Meaning, if there are two cities close to each other, so that if we add a Kalpif of no more than 70 amot and a fraction, which is a 2/3 of an amah, to this city, and we add a Kalpif of no more than 70 amot and a fraction to that city, these two Kalpifs would meet, meaning the open areas between the two cities is no more than 141 and 1/3 amot. Then the Kalpif is added to each city. The Kalpif added to each city makes the two cities to be like one large city for the purposes of the Techum, and therefore a person can walk on Shabbat from one city to the other and continue walking 2,000 amot beyond the borders of the second city, as we could see in the diagram by the article elucidated in this Mishnah. However, can see it will illustrate the point. And in the opinion of the sages, this is the only situation where we add 70 and 2/3 amot to a city. And the commentaries explain that the sages derived their view from the same verse as Rabbi Meir, from the wall of the city and outward. However, they explain it to mean that when we measure an area outside of one city, which is the city, we begin measuring from the wall. But when we seek to connect two cities, we begin measuring outward from somewhere beyond the city wall. They have a different explanation from the same pasuk than Rabbi Meir does, and the Rav does tell us, "V'lachaki chachamim," that Halacha follows the opinion of the sages, "She'en notin kapif le'ir achat ele ben shtei ayarot bilvad," that we only add a Kalpif to a city in a case where we want to connect two cities to be like one large city for the purposes of the Techum. And that is then, Rabotai, of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.